Good afternoon, everyone. I am Puneet Khandelwal, Program Head Utilities, WRI India. I welcome you all to the plenary of Financing India's Transition, making it inclusive and sustainable while supporting growth. I would like to welcome our distinguished guests on stage, Mr. Madhav Pai, Chief Executive Officer, WRI India, Mr. Sujoy Ghosh, Co-Chairman, Renewable Energy Council, CII, Surabji, Godrej Green Business Center, and our Chief Guest, Shri BVR Subramaniam, Chief Executive Officer, Niti Aayog. Mr. Sujoy will be joining us shortly. He's on the way. The Viksit Bharat 2047 vision designed to accelerate India's economic growth while building rural resilience, boosting manufacturing, and securing inclusive development. India stands at this pivotal juncture, trying to balance rapid growth with sustainable development. Funding is key for us to enable us continue this growth while ensuring a just transition. This session will focus on how India can finance this transition journey across sectors. The session will also feature the official launch of the CI-NERGY Alliance to steer energy transition in the commercial and industrial segment, an alliance that can be an important tool in identifying investment areas, in facilitating financial flows. Following the CI-NERGY Alliance launch, we will have the panel discussion on today's topic, Financing India's Transition. With this background, I would like to call upon Mr. Madhav Pai, Chief Executive Officer, WRI India, to share his opening remarks. Madhav is a respected thinker, practitioner who has been working on issues of urbanization, climate change, transportation, and environment. He was part of Institute's founding team. Under his leadership, as an Executive Director of WRI India, Ross Center, and Director of EMBR India, the team has supported implementation of several pioneering projects. Mr. Madhav.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to welcome all of you to this plenary on financing India's transition. Puneet did speak about the Viksit Bharat goals, the ambitious sort of agenda that has been set by Government of India that not only accelerates our economic growth, but also is ensuring that it is inclusive, it is resilient, and also environmentally sustainable. And I think today, this conversation is really focused around how do we finance this transition in a way that, when I was looking at 83% of India's, today about 80-odd% of India's energy transition so far has been funded by domestic finance. Only less than 20% we have been able to unlock, international financial flows. And also, I think there is also these numbers that say that if we are not able to achieve 40 to 50% indigenization, then we will go the same way, as the fossil fuel route of becoming dependent. So I think as we think about financing, I think these are two interesting sort of numbers. How do we increase sort of the international finance that we can bring, especially in the equity space on energy transition? And also, I think on the other hand, it's starting to look at how some of these indigenization also can be driven. So also this firm creation agenda, and again attracting investments into that space. I think we made tremendous progress on renewable energy. Today installed capacity is getting close to 50%. Today price is now almost at 2 rupees or so per unit. So I think on that front, I think we have done quite well. And I think now, if you look at some of the leader states, you are beginning to start to reach these points where you absolutely need to figure out how to invest in storage, or how do you sort of really solve for the intermittency of RE or for solar. And I think that's where I think whether it's these new technologies, whether it's small nuclear, whether it's green hydrogen, whether it's this big push on BESS, I think the challenge is, if you're going to make this large investment, what is the market for it, right? So you're trying to solve the problem of demand creation and financing at the small at the same time. And so today, I mean, in a way, I think what we are also trying to do in partnership with CII is to really launch this CI-NERGY Challenge, and I think we'll talk more about it. But it's a great example of, and as we talk about it, you'll see it's an example of also trying to do the demand creation for small to medium heat applications in MSMEs. So this is one example. I think this whole idea of, but I do think that our energy transition is this place where it's not sort of demand side, supply side, grid side problems. It's actually how do you solve the demand, the financing, and the grid at the same time as the projects. And I think all of this is early stage. There is a lot of risk. And so how do we also then think of instruments that can sort of really de-risk some of these investments? Of course, I want to also make sure that I, appreciate the valued partnership with CII. About 10, 12 years ago, Deepak was a part of it. We started, early days of solar. We created a green power market development group, which was really focused at CNI customers buying renewable energy, and a lot of it today, I mean, that market is done. And I think the idea of just really providing technical support at the early stages on doing the contracting, on discovering the price, sharing learnings, I think was very, very useful. I think just taking sort of inspiration from that conversation. And in fact, initially we had set up green power market development at the national level, and then specifically for different states with different CII chapters, we continued the exercise. Similarly, I think that's, so CII has been a long-standing partner for WRI and of course, for the industry. And I think, I think really the aspiration for this partnership also is that if we can ensure that, the CII sector is at the forefront of global energy transition. So with that, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. B.V.R. Subramaniam, CEO of NITI Aayog. He's a key architect of India's economy and policy reform, and to deliver his keynote address, and then we will follow this up with the launch of the Alliance for Corporate and Industrial Consumers. So with that, over to you.
My friend Madhav Pai, friends, other members in the audience. It's a pleasure to be with any event organized by WRI always. It's a very valued partner. So let me first recognize the contribution of WRI in a large number of areas, including, green transition, climate change, etc., in which we work very closely with them and have successfully actually made a lot of difference in policies, in the lives of people, in the way governments work. So first of all, I compliment WRI. I came for the Connect Karo last year. I've come again this year. And I'm extremely happy that this is one of the most well-organized gatherings of people who work on a similar theme and to exchange ideas, exchange thought, address new issues. So I think it's a pleasure. I mean, climate finance is something which I'll come to at the end, but let's look at what's happening in India. India is doing something which is unprecedented in history. It's trying to become a developed nation while actually trying to do it in a sustainable way on a low carbon trajectory. It has never happened in history before, certainly not for a nation of this size. The developed world has had the luxury of developing first and then tackling the issue of greenhouse gas emissions, carbon, etc. And of course, once they were wealthy, they could afford it. Large parts of the world which are not developed are actually struggling to develop while actually being on a low carbon path, which is in a way being forced on them, not just by global compacts, but also by the way climate is changing. India uniquely is actually trying to carve out a path for itself with very high developmental ambitions. An ambition to become a developed nation by 2047. with a per capita GDP which would put it in that league of less than 30 countries in the world, while doing all this in a low carbon, sustainable manner. It has never happened in history before, and I think whatever India demonstrates will be a role model for the world. I would call it the India development model for low carbon growth. And just as India has been a success, we are one of the rarest nations in the world which has sought its future in becoming a democracy which fulfills the aspirations of the people, and we have succeeded for 75 years in that. We were a country which was written off, which experts around the world thought had no future in 1947, and thought that our democracy would be a failure and the country would probably be shattered into pieces. We have stuck together. We are one nation. We are a major nation, fifth or a fourth largest economy, depending on how you count it. And we have been a successful democracy. No other country has become where we are today and come this far while also being a democracy. And I think in that same way, as we were a role model for the global south and for many, many hundreds of countries in the world, we will be a role model in the next 20 years by having a low carbon trajectory, taking us to become a developed nation. And I think that's something unprecedented. And I think the commitment for this is there at the top, at the Prime Minister level, at the political level, at the executive level, and at all levels in the country. And I think that's very, very important. Now, coming to the issue of climate change, I mean, we are not being the major contributors to, greenhouse gas emissions. 3 or 4% is what has been India's contribution to cumulative GHG gases in the world, in whatever is there. But we are equally affected, if not more, than all countries affected by what's happening. I mean, you look at the weather outside. I was just talking to Madhav when I came in. I said, this rain would have ruined your exhibition, because I remember he took me around for 5 years. He preferred to receive me inside the hall rather than outside, because he didn't want to get wet, I suspect. So it shows how climate is affected. I mean, in the last 24 hours, that is day before yesterday, I think in 24 hours, Chennai had something like 5 extreme cloud bursts, 10 sudden cloud bursts, all in a matter of 24 hours. You look at just the last week's news item, Vaishno Devi Yatra, they've lost 40, 50 people. J&K lost about 130, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, across. I mean, what is this? We are familiar, this is Varsha Rutu by Indian calendar, but we have not been used to these kind of situations where you have long dry spells and then sudden cloud bursts. What would you attribute these extreme events to? I mean, the monsoons are normal, but extreme events have increased. Monsoons can be in deficit, extreme events are. So the impacts of climate change are not something where we have to wait for the next generation to grow up. We are actually facing it day to day. And in summers, we are seeing extreme heat. And the extreme heat is 50 degrees in the sun, not in the temperature we measure is in the shade. In the sun is a different temperature. And then you have got people working around the clock in that weather. And then the cooling requirements that are going to be there. So I think the country is extremely vulnerable to climate change, and I think that's a big problem. Having said that, there is thanks to the consensus and thanks to the leadership at the top, which has promised to deliver a net zero goal by 2070, India is actually working very hard. Where are we? We made commitments at our NDCs, and we are one of the rare countries which are actually not just on track, but ahead in terms of meeting our NDC goals. 50% of our installed energy capacity is already renewable. We have cut down our energy intensity of our economy by 36%. 20% of our petrol is now blended with ethanol. I mean, they were unthinkable even 10, 15 years ago, and they've all been done. And as I see rapidly, I mean, we've just been doing some modeling in NITI. NITI is coming out with a net zero pathway. The amount of coal generation capacity that is there today will be the coal generation capacity or slightly less in 47. It's rising a bit. You're adding some thermal capacity, but it's going to peak in less than 10 years. Less than 10 years, thermal coal capacity is going to peak. And then it's going to gradually decline. That means most of the plant that will be built in the near future will not have a full lifespan also. That has serious implications actually for that sector. And this is in a different context. Today, 50% of our generation capacity is thermal. 50% is renewable. By 2047, the thermal share of our entire country generation capacity is going to be in the range of 15%, 12% actually to be precise. It's going to be low because our own requirements of power are going to go from about 500 gigawatts today to more than 2000 gigawatts, 4 times with the same share, same absolute value of thermal power, you're going to actually collapse the share of thermal power as a share of our total economy for energy production. So this is going to be the scenario that is there ahead of us. And I think India can be proud of what it has achieved. And I'm confident, given the seriousness with which we are pursuing our net zero goals, we will certainly be on track. It's not only domestically. India is also playing a leadership role internationally. We've been showing leadership. We have floated the International Solar Alliance, and we have also floated the Coalition for Disaster Resilience, CDRI. So all these bodies are coming out of our own initiatives. So we are not only doing a lot within the country, but we are also promoting this concept of sustainability, energy efficiency, low carbon growth across the world. And I think that's very, very important. So what does this low carbon growth mean for India? And that actually translates into what we need for climate finance. Low carbon growth means today we are looking at a $3 trillion economy, $3.5 trillion. That's what we are. End of this year in dollar terms, we'll actually be $4 trillion. Okay, 4.01. And we'll be ahead of Japan. We probably have already overtaken Japan if you do the maths, because we are already halfway through this year. So by 2047, we are looking at a country which is going to be $30 trillion, which is about 9 times the size today. It's unthinkable how big that nation is going to be. It's larger than United States GDP today. Just to tell you, just to give you a magnitude of what India will be in 2047. And for most of us, it's going to be in our lives. That this is going to be a country in 2047 which is going to be larger than what United States is today. They would also be larger than us by then. They'd also grow. I'm not denying that. But from our own point of view, it's something we can't conceive. What does it mean? 85-90% of India is yet to be built. It's still out there. There'll not be just one auditorium like this. There'll be 30 more such auditoriums in the neighborhood. There'll be many more buildings. There'll be many more, things happening all around the country. It's a challenge because this is going to place huge demand on our resources. But it's also an opportunity. The opportunity is to do things right. If 90% of what has to be done in India is yet to be done, it has yet to be built, it has yet to be organized, can we do it the right way? I think that's it. Can we plan to ensure that we do it in an efficient manner, in a sustainable manner? I think that's very, very... And what do you mean by that? We have mobility, cars, buses, public transport. Can we shift to a more carbon efficient way of doing it? Can we go in for electric or some other modes of transport, which are going to be far less intensive as far as the damage to climate is concerned? Can we change our building code so that the buildings that are going to be constructed are going to be climate friendly? And not just commercial space, commercial as well as domestic space. There's going to be huge demand for steel, cement. Now, these are the major, carbon guzzlers, I would say, or carbon emitters that are going to be there. Are we going to actually transform and make those industries transit to a more green way of manufacturing? That's going to be there. All projections say that our steel production is going to be in by 2047 somewhere around 500 million tons. That's a huge jump from where we are today, almost 2.5 to 3 times. Similarly, 4 to 5x is going to be the production of cement and other things or other industrial products. So can we do things the right way so that we lock in efficiency, we lock in, carbon-friendly methods, we lock in ways of doing things which are least harmful for the atmosphere. And what does that mean? It means a lot of changes that have to be done. And there, institutions like WRI and all the partners in the room, all the people have a role to play. We need building codes which are different. They have to be rewritten. You need smart building codes. Public transportation has to be designed differently. Policies for EVs have to change. Policies for buses will have to change. Not just the policies for EVs, but the infrastructure that has to sustain an EV ecosystem has to be changed. We need to change the way we cool our buildings. Can we promote passive cooling already? Can we change the way we generate electricity? Solar looks very nice, and we are getting them at prices you've just heard, which are ridiculously cheap, but it's not 24/7. Currently, if you add storage costs to solar, it's still not yet competitive. But the prices are crashing rapidly, and the prices on the thermal side are rising rapidly. That's the thing. The latest figures for thermal power plant addition is 12 to 13 crores per megawatt. It translates into actually a production cost of thermal power of 8 to 9 rupees. So solar alone is already much, much cheaper. With battery storage and all, or pumped storage, there's going to be different. But the thing is, rapidly climate-friendly technologies are becoming viable. All this will have to be done. So I think a lot can be done right now, seeing the growth opportunity that is there in front of us to lock in low carbon growth paths, lock in smart solutions, and do things the right way. So I think that's very important. And that's where one thing comes in. This is the issue of climate finance. Are we going to be able to fund all these new technologies, new things that have to be done? I actually don't foresee a problem per se. There's only one issue, and I'll come to that as we go along. The monies that are required are going to be huge. They're immense. I mean, the numbers are humongous. If we talk around, somebody says $15 trillion, somebody says $20 trillion. That's the cumulative investment that is needed in energy by 2070. On an annual basis, that turns out to about 200 to $300 billion per year in energy alone. That's the kind of monies that are required. Currently, the kind of monies that are flowing into green technologies is about $40 to $50 billion. So we are talking of a 4 to 5 to 6-fold increase in money flows to this area. What is the problem? Why are we not able to jump and actually leap and have this kind of investment flows? I think there are two sides to the story. One is technologies are still not fully viable. Some are becoming viable. Many of them, a lot of fancy, things like green steel, different ways of making your silicon batteries, the different ways of actually producing iron and steel, of producing cement, they are still not cost effective. At a very basic level, and even EV is not yet competitive with petrol. But that's if you, of course, price petrol with carbon or whatever, or but technology prices are crashing. So how do you make all these technologies viable? I personally do not believe that things will take off only through government subsidies and government funded programs. Government can act as a catalyst, as an incubator to demonstrate feasibility of things. But things will take off when they become viable. If I come to your house and tell you that, look, I'll sell you a carbon-friendly air conditioner, it's just going to cost you 2 lakh rupees. And you know that the nearest one, which is a normal AC, pretty dirty, it's going to cost you 50,000 rupees. You know how you're going to make your decision. It's very, very simple. These are not decisions which are made at some macro level. They are made at micro level by millions and crores of people. You have to change their behavior, which basically means things have to become commercially viable. One is, of course, technological development will make things viable. The other side is we need to make cost of finance low. Currently, cost of capital is very high. NITI has just produced a report on breaking through the EV barrier in India. It is just in WRI, and we worked together to release that report. We did intense consultations with people in the EV space. And one of the things we realized, it's no longer about the technology. It is a whole lot of operational issues which are there. Buildings do not allow, multi-storied buildings do not allow car charging in the basement. In many cities, the rules and the bylaws do not allow. If your RWA does not allow a charging point in the basement, where will you charge your car? You normally do it at night. So your disincentive begins there. The cost of actually installing a charger shoots up because of where the discoms price the connection that is there. And today, the usage rate of all public charging stations is 3% in the country. They break even at 10% because there are chargers. You will see tons of chargers on roads, nobody is using them. So a whole host of issues need to be solved. And one of the biggest issues, banks do not finance EVs. When I talk of EVs, I'm talking of trucks, buses. Why? There's no resale market for that. Until a banker knows that there is a resale value, because what does the banker look at? The banker looks at a default by the borrower. And in a default, I actually seize the vehicle and have a resale price and I recover something. If there's a zero recovery price or an unknown recovery price, I'm not going to fund that asset. So you don't get finance for EVs. This is just one sector. I can go ad nauseum. And there are a whole host of financing issues. One, because there is uncertainty. This is what I've explained. And the other, because when you're trying to finance this sector, your cost of capital is at around 15-16%. I mean, I actually read a statistics, and I was talking to Nick Stern. Financing a renewable energy program, the cost of capital in Germany is around 8% and is 15% in India. Now, that's the kind of difference. What could probably be viable there becomes unviable here just because of cost of capital. So I think it's important to reduce the cost of capital. So there are a lot of problems and challenges in making technology is viable. And one of the critical factor is cost of capital, and that's what your session is about, which is, climate finance. So climate finance is not something which is going to land from the moon. How do we cut cost of capital is the simple question. There are multiple ways of doing it. One way is sovereign guarantees. If you realize, I think recently, the first bus program for EVs, we pooled in the demand from NITI, put in some subsidies, we got a good price. But the latest one which is there, we have got pooled payment mechanisms. And the pooled payment mechanism has a sovereign guarantee behind it. So that whoever is, a state transport corporation buys your bus and the default, somebody is actually standing guarantee for the default. Automatically the cost of capital goes down. So I think those kind of stuff. Also stuff like first loss guarantees, and also, stuff like, co-lending. There are a whole host of issues. If they are resolved correctly, climate finance will start flowing. Again, these are not macro issues. The macro problem is cost of capital is high. How do you convert it to low-cost lending? A lot of micro issues will have to be resolved. Most people in this room actually cannot resolve them. So these are issues which have to be done with bankers, firms, sellers. They have to sit together and come to solutions. And I think till that is done, you won't reach a takeoff point as far as climate finance is concerned. Some few mega projects will get done. But whether even take a solar mega project, unless somebody signs a PPP, that won't take off actually, a paper purchase agreement, a PPA. You need a PPA before the rest of there's no financial closure otherwise. If a government doesn't stand on the other side and I guarantee purchase of this, forget that. We are talking of, one important climate-friendly technology is nuclear. And NITI is closely involved in, the drafting of the new nuclear act to make private sector permissible in this particular sector. Everything is fine about nuclear power. But nuclear power is such a long-term investment that till there is a government guarantee of assured takeoff of the power, there will be nobody who will invest it because there will be no financial closure. So I think climate finance is not only about EVs, it goes all the way up to nuclear power. And mind you, these are mind-boggling, but they're all doable problems. It's happening in other countries. Take nuclear, for example. There's been a boom in nuclear power plant construction around the world. 3 Mile Island, a lot of you may have seen the movie or read about it. That plant has just got restarted last year. Financed by whom? Guess, anybody? Microsoft. Because they need the power for their data centers. And this is clean power for data centers. Yeah. So there is a revived boom in nuclear power around the world because of the demand from AI. So there is a world which is out there, which is opening up. The question is, if other countries can do these things, why can't we do it? And I think that this is something, and I think NITI is working very hard to address all these issues. We have working groups. We'll be coming out with some reports on that end of September. Just 1 or 2 points. While we are working on all this transition, the other problem with climate finance is when money is there are no projects. I think that's the second problem. Very often, you don't have bankable projects which are being posted. People are used to making the old type of projects. They are not used to the new type of projects in the clean energy space, in the clean transport space. Can you think of any municipality which has floated a project for making my city 100% EV driven with appropriate charging infrastructure? It's a project. It can be funded. But somebody has to prepare and float the project. Similarly, in energy transition, I read somewhere that the United States is going to face a massive challenge in their distribution system. Because as vehicles shift to EVs, every house has a line coming to the house and you have the junction box. The junction box can take a certain load, say 100 units of something. If the entire house shifts to electric, no gas for heating, no gas for cooking, no IE engine, IEC vehicle. Everything becomes electric. You need 3 times the load, which means you have to completely rewire the entire connection to the house and change the junction box. It's actually $1 trillion of investment just in the United States if the entire country switches to power. We are not even looking at that. It's nice to say we will all start plugging our vehicles at home and charge. You will have to actually rewire your own house. You have to rewire whatever is coming into the house, all the way from the distribution point, because they're not designed for these kind of loads. So there is going to be huge investment. These require projects. So NITI, for example, is working. We have worked with Ministry of Power, Ministry of MNRE, and with 2-3 think tanks. And we have floated a platform called the Asset Platform, ASSET. And the word ET stands for energy transition. It actually is to help states prepare projects for energy transition. Because the funds are there, you got the World Bank, ADB, other green energy funds which are there. How do states generate projects which can access these funds? So there is a supply issue, there's a demand issue. The supply issue is of money, and how do you reduce the cost of capital? The demand side is you need enough projects which are demanding capital. So on that side also that has to be there, and that's what I urge a lot of people in the room. Wherever you are working, in states, with individual departments, think of how do you generate projects which can actually access climate funds. And when I talk of climate funds, we are talking of $1 billion of money, not millions of dollars. You'll have to think on that scale and move up on that. Another important area, and I think that's where India is very, climate change for India is actually a nation building endeavor. And one of the big things which has been floated is, the Prime Minister has given a call for, mission life, lifetime for a friendly environment. And mission life is actually a way we bend the curve. We have so far been looking at energy and other stuff on the what is the demand going to be there and how do we generate clean supply for that. Why can't we think of actually reducing the demand for all these things? So that's why, how do you do that? By being more environment friendly, by recycling, cutting your energy usage, being more efficient. And I think this is also going to be a major part of the future. And all of us also can contribute to that. And technology is again helping that, shared rides actually reduces demand for transport. Smart ACs will reduce demand for power. There are a whole host of things that can be done which actually bend the curve and reduce. And I think one of the reasons why I'm hopeful that India will actually be a success in its whole climate transition business is while we are focusing on the energy transition and green transition on the energy supply side, we're also changing the demand side to make the economy and the individuals more energy and climate efficient. And I think that's there. So I think there is no single silver bullet will solve the problem. There is no single sector which can solve the whole thing. And in that context, I think what WRI and CII are starting today, the CI-NERGY Alliance, I think it's a very good initiative, bringing people together on a platform, just like NITI's asset platform, to create solutions which will actually generate, a more low carbon growth path. I think it will help MSMEs buy more efficient equipment, make them more, energy friendly. These kind of initiatives can also help individuals or organizations leverage international funds. As I said, supply is a problem. Supply of projects is a problem. They will create the demand for money. So I think this will be there. And as we go along our journey, and nation building is not only development, but also being, sustainable. I think we all are partners in this journey. We can redefine growth. We can redefine our path. We can become a role model for the world on becoming a developed economy, but which is also clean and energy efficient. And I think everybody working together, government, financiers, civil society, think tanks, the private sector, we all can pull ourselves together and make this actually happen. Developed, sustainable, Vikasit Bharat is not a dream, it's a reality which can be achieved. Thank you very much. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir, for that inspiring keynote and for setting the stage on how India can finance its clean energy transition. I would now like to invite our guest, Mr. Sujoy Ghosh, on stage. Mr. Sujoy Ghosh, who is the co-chairman of Renewable Energy Council, CII Sorabji Godrej Green Business Center, as well as the Vice President and Country Managing Director, India First Solar, to deliver this partner address ahead of its CI-NERGY Alliance. Yes.
Shri B.V. Subramaniam ji, CEO Niti Aayog, Mr. Madhav Pai, CEO WRI, distinguished guests and participants, a very good afternoon. Sir, your speech was extremely thought-provoking, and from a CII standpoint, I think what I wanted to say was that the industry, for the industry today, the transition to clean energy is about competitiveness, right? It's about growth, and more importantly, it's about aligning to global value chains, right? As we look at the globalization or the deglobalization and realignment of global value chains which are happening. Most of the industry on its own have set voluntary targets for reducing their carbon footprint. The RE100 vision, which all of us adhere to, net zero targets have been set as voluntary targets by a lot of the large corporates. The challenge is really with the MSMEs right now. And while the options today are available, there are a lot of challenges. Primarily high upfront capex, very fragmented procurement pathways, lack of standards, and then policy and regulatory barriers to access, green power or green technologies. As we keep trying to balance between generating our own energy versus relying on the distribution utilities for the supply and the services which they promise. And of course, the access to finance, and especially again, I'm referring to MSMEs here. So all of these are issues, and in our opinion, the proposed CI-NERGY Alliance is a platform to provide hand-holding support to the industry to cover all these aspects. Right? It is going to bring together potential buyers of these clean energy solutions, financial institutions, technology providers, policymakers, and regulators, to create this ecosystem which is required. CII has always been at the forefront of such initiatives with things like the Green Building Ratings, the Green Business Center. Obviously was a flagship initiative of CII. Product certifications, net zero programs. CII was actively involved with the Ministry of Renewable Energy to develop standards and certify for installers under the PM Surya Ghar Yojana as one example of how CII was involved in such initiatives, as well as the Green Power Market Development program, through which CII facilitated renewable energy transactions exceeding 1 gigawatt. The association we have with WRI is long-standing, and we are very confident the current partnership with WRI now takes this collaboration to a new level. As an industry leader and as part of CII, I'm confident that CI-NERGY will not only accelerate India's clean energy transition, but also position our industries as leaders in the global green economy, aligning to the Viksit Bharat goals of the government. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for those remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we now turn to a milestone moment in today's plenary, the launch of CI-NERGY Alliance. The commercial and industrial sector is central to India's growth, but it also contributes significantly to energy demand and emissions. Unlocking clean energy for this sector is vital if India is to stay on the course towards its climate and competitiveness goals. CI-NERGY Alliance, anchored by WRI India and Confederation of Indian Industry, has been created to steer this transition. It will catalyze corporate clean energy procurement, support policy and market reforms, and bring businesses, innovators, financiers, and policymakers together to drive industrial decarbonization on a scale. I will now invite few guests from the audience to join us on the stage. Mr. K. Murli Krishnan, Principal Counselor, CII-GBC. Mr. Sai Siddharth from the Sustainability, Equity and Diversity Fund, who is supporting this initiative. My colleagues Shivani, Ahona, Deepak, Abhinav, and Prashant to join us for the launch of CI-NERGY Alliance. I request Mr. Subramaniam sir, joined by Madhav and Sujoy sir, to come forward. I request Mr. Subramaniam sir to ring the bell few times to launch the Alliance, marking a memorable moment for all of us to embark on the journey towards green and clean planet. Thank you, sir. I request you to present the launch video.
India's commercial and industrial sector powers our economy through jobs, exports, and growth. Yet, it contributes to 30% of India's CO2 emissions. For India to achieve net zero by 2070, the commercial and industrial sector must be at the forefront of energy transition. Electricity accounts for just 18 to 20% of the C&I sector's energy use. And with much of it still fossil-based, the clean energy transition becomes even more urgent. We need to electrify, but with cleaner sources. While there are many solutions, there is a need to work with stakeholders to scale. In India, it is estimated that 63 million MSMEs still lack access to clean energy, and 1.2 billion square feet of commercial built-up area will need to transition to clean energy. But what if there was a different story? One where growth and green go hand in hand, where industries could access cleaner, affordable, uninterrupted and reliable energy at scale. Introducing CI-NERGY, an initiative by WRI India and CII, an alliance bringing together the entire C&I energy ecosystem. CI-NERGY will catalyze clean energy procurement by fostering collaboration, promoting transparency, engaging in policy dialogues, facilitating finance and enabling innovation, demonstrating pilots, and building shared knowledge and capacities to align the commercial and industrial sector with India's climate goals. To achieve this, we need speed, we need scale, we need everyone. Be a part of CI-NERGY, steering energy transitions.
Before moving forward in the session, I would also like to extend an open invitation to all of you to join the Alliance and engage with us further. A dedicated networking room has been set up at Magnolia, where our team will be available today and tomorrow to share more information about the Alliance, including how to join, the value proposition for members, and the opportunity it creates. Now I would like to welcome on stage my colleague, Ms. Pamli Deka, Program Head, Energy Transition Finance. Pamli brings experience in the energy sector across operational, consulting, and financing roles, Prior to her joining WRI India, she managed the South Asia operations of the Private Financing Advisory Network. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. In addition to Pamli, Madhav and Sujoy, we have amongst us Ms. Shruti Goyal, co-CEO of Upaya Social Ventures. Shruti brings deep experience in supporting early-stage startups that create dignified jobs and drive inclusive development. She will share how catalytic capital and innovative financing models can unlock the potential of social enterprises in India's transition journey. Also, I would like to welcome Mr. Vivek Bhatia, Managing Director and CEO of TKIL Industries Private Limited. Mr. Bhatia brings a wealth of experience in industrial transformation, innovation, strategic leadership across global markets. Before leading TKIL Industries, he served as the CEO of the Asia Pacific region of ThyssenKrupp AG, where he oversaw operations across multiple countries and drove strategic growth initiatives. I request Pamli to start the panel discussion on today's topic.
Hello. Thank you so much, Puneet. Congratulations on the launch to us. Madhav is going to join us briefly, but in the meantime, I think we should get started because we have a bit of a time crunch, as always. Okay, it's a great pleasure for me to have Sujoy, Vivek, and Shruti on stage along with Madhav. And I think I'll begin with what Subramaniam sir said, that, India is in this unique space where we are trying to move towards development, but at the same time, we are trying to have this in a low carbon sustainable manner. I think that's very different from the other countries' journey. So we need to kind of design our own journey. And I'm very happy that we have experts from very different spaces. So there are a few themes that we would like to cover in the panel today. We would like to talk about urban systems with Madhav, consumer financing with Sujoy, and particularly on infrastructure innovation with Vivek, and then with Shruti, we'll try to talk about startup capital, the kind of buzzword startup. And Shruti comes from Bangalore, so yeah, Bangalore is like the Silicon Hub. So we will try to have it in two parts. First part, we'll try to set the context, and the second part, we'll talk about exploring solutions. So as Madhav joins us, I'll start already with Sujoy. So Sujoy, it would be interesting to understand from your end, what are the key kind of financing opportunities and challenges that you see in terms of consumer financing? And I just kind of continuing the discussion which we just heard, right? That consumer financing to a huge extent is still difficult. There is this gap between existence of financing and then the ability to absorb that financing, particularly from the solar sector. If you could shed some light, that would be great.
Thanks, Pamli. Always a pleasure to be on a panel with you. So I think, while the synergy themes around industrial decarbonization, in our experience, the larger corporates, people like us who are running large factories, do have access to finance. Maybe not at that competitive rate as compared to, let's say, government projects, which are underwritten by long-term PPA, because finally industrial consumers cannot give long-term visibility of the offtake. Typically, if you look at a utility, their PPA tenures are like 25 years. An industrial consumer may find it very challenging to give a 25-year commitment, especially because you don't know what you're going to produce in the next 25 years. Right, so that's one big uncertainty which drives the cost of capital up. The other issue is that there are regulatory risks, right? I'm still talking large corporates, but the access to grid, the interplay between the state regulator who mostly supports the state discoms, and as soon as you start looking at large industries trying to generate their own energy because it's lower cost, the economics are overwhelmingly in favor of large corporates going and building their own farms for solar wind or solar wind hybrids. The discom will increase the minimum demand charges. They'll increase the wheeling charges, and they also increase they'll play around with the slots because there is a time of day differential charge on the energy between what you consume in the day and what you consume in the evening and all of that, right? And so these kind of regulatory uncertainties also impact the ability of either the industry or the IPP who is selling the power to go and get the asset financed on a long-term basis, right? So I'm just giving you why the access is mostly underwritten by the off-taker's balance sheet. It's still a balance sheet financing, right? It's not really non-recourse as one would expect, and large solar and wind projects are. Now, when you come to MSMEs, the problem is even more compounded, right? Because a lot of the MSMEs are in the commercial or the lower strata of the industrial connection from a load standpoint. So, while large corporates can get dedicated power lines, they get dedicated feeders, they have zero load shedding commitments from the DISCOM. MSMEs don't enjoy that kind of buying power. And so besides all of these issues, there's further complications around, how their loads are treated, what happens when you have, load shedding or technical curtailment on the feeder, and he's still generating and you can't get access to the energy. So then there are all these other kind of complexities which happen to the MSMEs, besides the fact that MSMEs will be even more constrained to do long-term offtakes. So most MSMEs would resort to what's called behind the meter, but the capacities are very limited, right? And, you can set up a small rooftop or a behind the meters, battery plant. But really, if you want to decarbonize 100% of your energy, you can get to the first 30-40% very easily. And the last 10% is extremely tough, right? And so that's the challenge which you face in the larger side. Now, if you look at, there's another sector which we didn't talk about a lot, but as much as CNI or the industrial load is a significant chunk of our electricity consumption, so is agriculture, right? And, the greening of the agricultural sector has also been a very big priority of the current government through schemes like the PM Kusum. There's a very aggressive program to completely solarize the agricultural feeders, which are connected and doing all the pumping. So about a quarter of our total load is pumping load in the country. And if you look the high level math, it's almost equivalent to what the MSMEs have. So very similar sector, but despite all the push from the government, the challenge is getting access to capital, right? I mean, A, the banks don't understand this. B, they will treat this like a fully collateralized asset. Now, how will a farmer, provide 100% of the asset, including the land as a collateral? The cost of that is prohibitive, right? So, and then it's treated more like a retail product rather than a project financing. So the way they would finance a motorcycle loan or a housing loan they'll apply the same, framework to look at a power generating asset, which sometimes it's not efficient. And so that's why, even the agricultural sector where you're looking at retail consumers or you look at PM Suryaghar, right? Despite the subsidies from the government, unlocking the financing on a scale and speed has not happened yet. And I think we can debate why, but I mean, those are the issues.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for setting that kind of, it gives an overarching picture of the situation. Actually, coming to you, Madhav, building on, this whole idea of moving towards this low carbon transition, particularly in the context of the urban systems, right? Just wanted to understand what are you, and also I think in the morning we discussed in the morning plenary to a bit, what do you think an organization like WRI or research organizations like WRI's think tanks, do tanks, how can we come into the picture and try to help in, improving this or facilitating this whole financing ecosystem? What role could we be playing?
To give two examples, I think. One, if you look at the whole urban sector, right, that is the number that you need $1 trillion. About half of that money is for transport, right? And about 150 billion or so of that is for public transport, for mostly rail and all of that. Now, this has to be supported by the land development that will benefit from this infrastructure. The challenge is, given the high ticket size, you need to really think, and the involvement of land, you have to really think about longer tenures, very different instruments, right? So what is, and so, you might even invite some, for example, Bangalore builds a metro. It should ideally have its top 10 leading companies set up their offices along the metro corridor. But for them to make it attractive, maybe you give a free lease for the first 5 years within whatever, you just have to, and then what is the sort of collateral, etc., that will have to be created? How do you create this financing on the bank side? I think is a huge sort of challenge, right? So this is sort of one end of the transport spectrum, if you were to say, and huge opportunities. We're building this. What's going to happen in Meerut and Modinagar today, when it's going to be 50 minutes from Delhi, is a huge opportunity to think of these kind of real estate assets that will get created, and how do we actually use that money to finance actually the paying back of these systems, etc. So, and this requires inventing basically. Yeah. The second is the work we have been doing with electric buses, right? See, this whole, and Mr. Subramaniam also spoke about the aggregation challenge, and all that did is actually solve the problem of manufacturing. So it gave enough signal to the manufacturers to build manufacturing capacity. But now one of the main changes that are going to happen is they didn't bid for the cost of the bus, they bid for the kilometer of travel, right? So now you need private operators. Today, if you look at whether it's buses or trucks, and traditionally the whole transport sector in India, because of the Motor Vehicle Act and how it was created in the 50s to nationalize, is actually against the idea of aggregation and creating big private sector, right? So now, in this very disaggregated market, you want these operators to operate, and we've based on global operations, etc. You want operators to be able to operate 500 to 1,000 buses, not more than them, not less than them, for them to really become successful. We have barely 10 operators in the country, right? We will have 100,000 buses. We will need at least 100 operators. Now these operators will need equity. These operators will need debt. And their books today have zero bankability, right? So, but we know that this is a problem. Again, if you bring down the tenure, increase the tenure from 7 years to 12 years, because bank only gives 7 years. Then if you bring down interest rate from 10.5% to 8.5%, you've dropped the cost of the asset by 30%, right? So what kind of guarantees, and one is this payment security mechanism, which is a very good experiment that is, but how do we really solve the operators' bankability problem is a huge issue, right? And they both on the equity side and the debt side, it's a huge opportunity. I know a lot of people are exploring, but I think this is also, and then same, the trucks will follow, then the harder to abate maritime and aviation will follow. So I think these are, again, I think huge opportunities. And I think people like us can create as much as possible information, dialogue, etc. around this, I think. And really getting also the capacity building of the banking sector is, I think, a huge opportunity. I think our domestic banks, I think, especially on the banking side, need a lot of capacity building around this issue.
No, I think, and this applies to all sectors, all kind of regions. There's a lot of kind of rule books out there, guidelines, but I guess we have a very important role in trying to go and work with these different organizations who are working at the grassroots level, rural areas, peri-urban, urban areas, to build this kind of capacity. Actually, picking up on your point on innovation, ticket size and land development, I'll come to Vivek. So Vivek, would be great to hear from you in terms of, you have been involved in developing infrastructure for a long time, particularly in the context of energy transition. So do you see some kind of patterns which are evolving in terms of, how these large ticket size projects are being financed? We still see that issue with, that the risk perception continues to be high, and there are some projects which have a better bankability versus others. So would you kind of share your thoughts on what is the current status of affairs with respect to how these risks are assessed? And obviously we'll go into the solution part in the next section.
Well, first of all, before I come to those points, I just want to, contextualize a bit of where we are going as a country. See, I think we've said very clearly 2070 is net zero, right? And, hopefully by that time, what we are looking at is whatever we have in coal is going to come from sustainable sources. That's one, which is a huge number in terms of generation. Second, if we look at our per capita consumption of electricity, where we are in India and where we need to be or where we will be as Viksit Bharat, even after adjusting for lifestyle changes and being more sustainable, I think we are talking about not 10, 20%, we are talking about multiples, right? It's going to be 4x, 5x, 10x, whatever, but it's going to be some massive number. So in that context, I think the runway for green energy is huge. It is far beyond what all of us can imagine right now, right? It's like saying in the early 90s, what will be the number of cell phones we are going to have? I mean, all predictions are going to be off the chart, So we are in that kind of a situation with regards to energy. Now, what do we need to do? Obviously, to build infrastructure at that SARI scale capacity will require a lot of capital to lay that out. It will require capital for the equipment itself. It will require capital for the grid and many other things. But here, I want to say, in India, we have been at times, we tend to miss the opportunity. Not in terms of ambition, not in terms of, trying to build a certain amount of infrastructure, but really extracting the entire value that opportunity affords us. So what do I mean to say by that? Well, let's say if we are going to set up X gigawatt of solar panels, why should we just think about solar panels as a project? Why not look at the entire manufacturing chain of panels, which is what we have started to do now as a company. If we are going to talk about nuclear, why talk about importing a nuclear unit? Why not the entire supply chain of building that nuclear unit in India? If you are talking about green hydrogen, then why just talk about buying an electrolyzer, but let's have the entire supply chain of that electrolyzer right down to the, so-called rare earths, right? And when we do that, I think we really get a multiplier effect, because when you have built up a very robust supply chain for this kind of a huge demand, which will play out over the next 20, 30, 40 years, when you build out a supply chain for that, effectively you do that not just for India, but then you become a reliable supply base for the world at large. And that is where also lies the secret of competitiveness, right? So I think we have to really think about this in really broader terms for us to really make the most out of this generational opportunity. It's a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity that we are looking forward to as a country. So that is, I think, point number one. Point number two, I think as a country, when we look at the dynamics between industry and government, I think what we have and what we are very blessed with is a very entrepreneurial kind of environment. And industry, despite all the challenges, finds its ways to flourish, finds its way to make sense of it all. And I think that is a very powerful thing. What we need is basically policy to make things more conducive rather than to be obstructive. So to give you an example, today, if we look at solar generation, we are talking about 2 rupees or 2.5 rupees per unit. What is industry paying anywhere in the country? I think 5 rupees is a dream for anybody in industry. Forget about it, with subsidy maybe somewhere. So you're talking about 8 to 12. Some unlucky guy is probably paying 16. And if you are stuck with a DG set, you've had it, right? Now, this is the contrast. On the one side, we are not short of land to put attractive solar projects. The cost of power from those solar projects is anywhere around 2 rupees. You add another 2 rupees for storage. You add another 1 rupee for transmission. So you're at 5 rupees. Why shouldn't industry all over the country get green power at 5 rupees? 100%. Now, one is, if we start doing that, someone will say, I will have issues with cross subsidy and things like that. Let's forget that for a moment. But let's imagine a world where all of India, all industry gets rupees at 5 rupees versus the 12 rupees, 16 rupees, 8 rupees. Sujoy was, being generous. So now what happens when industry gets this deep discount? First thing, you get a huge boost on competitiveness in manufacturing. Second, just because of that huge boost, you get a huge boost in further demand because more industry will come up. Third, you get a huge boost in employment, right? All these people who get paid are ultimately going to pay taxes. Everything that the industry and people will consume will generate GST. This will by far more than compensate for any subsidy loss that we are talking about, across various segments. So I think that is what I mean when we have to think about unlocking demand and synchronizing possibilities, because then the results can be tremendous for a country like you. So that's where, let me cap it off, So 3 points, very simple points, just to recap. Demand is huge. It's going to be far beyond any number we can pencil on paper today. So let's not worry about that. Second, I think we really, really need to think how we are going to make sure that we are capturing the entire opportunity, which is going really deep into the supply chain and making India really resilient in being able to build out all of that capacity competitively in India. And thirdly, let's streamline everything and let's unlock the flows which are possible even with economics that we have today.
Great. Actually, 3 big points. We can have another discussion on this. Unfortunately, we are always running out of time in panels. So you mentioned about entrepreneurship, and I think this is a good segue to move to Shruti. So Shruti, would like to hear from you, coming from the startup ecosystem, from both the aspects, right? As a funder and as also kind of working very closely with these startups which are trying to raise funding, and startups. Kind of in this context of this discussion, I think we haven't come up on the role of startups, but that cannot be undermined. I think every big company that we see right now had started somewhere, and every organization has a role to play in this kind of whole transition journey. So would like to hear your thoughts on, what are despite the clear need for these startups and the products and the solutions that they're offering, we still see a lot of issues and challenges when it comes to raising finance. What are your thoughts on that, and why the situation is not improving at the pace at which it should be improving?
Yeah, thanks, Pameli, for first of all for WRI to organize this. This is my first time to connect Karo, so it's very enlightening. Just to demystify what a startup is, and it's a great sign for an economy to have the kind of startup wave that India is having. It's a sign that the policy, regulatory environment, and the civil society itself is churning out good trends and patterns for these market-based models to emerge. Now, when from the perspective of a startup founder or a startup, what does spectrum of finance look like? The spectrum of finance looks like from an R&D innovation grant to raising Series C to becoming a 3,000 crore company. And we are talking about the stage at which Upaya Social Ventures invests as impact first investors is anywhere for a company who's doing a revenue of 1 CR to 5 CR revenue. They are mostly post-revenue. So we are talking about those aspirations, but great models. Now, I'll talk about 2 parts of the supply chain of finance, which is the consumer side and the supplier side. Now, supply side, investors or the commercial financiers, and my panelists also spoke about it, is traditional finance is not working out for the startup ecosystem or even this sector of climate finance. Because we are talking about startups A, which are anyways early stage businesses, risky, perceived risky, and on top of it working on sectors like circularity, trying to finance solar rooftop for some industry. These are unheard of sectors. These are sectors which nobody knows. So there are trust issues. So how do you build for that trust issue? And data and the whole aspect around building data for it is missing in our ecosystem. Now, the other is the trade-off, the perceived trade-off of If you are sustainable, then you are not profitable. So that is a perceived trade-off to us. It is not, because what we are seeing from when we are investing, and we have around 44 investments in India now, is that working on impact preservation is trickling down for capital preservation. We have secured 10 exits. We have recycled capital. All my businesses, we've got in 14 years, 5 write-offs. So this is great. And my portfolio of impact first investments are doing 18 to 20% IRR. So we are talking about really good financial capital preservation. But on top of it, we have created 50,000 dignified jobs which are verified, impact verified. And we are aspiring to create, say, 300,000 jobs through this kind of recycled capital. So this is a case to say that innovativeness in finance is what we are looking for startups. With what we have today in terms of capital available, even with that, for the startup ecosystem, it looks like there is soup, but we are trying to drink it with a fork because the instrument is not right. So we are talking about the kind of innovations that I would like to talk about is revenue-based financing, results-based financing, where you are seeing the result and putting the money. Impact-linked financing or loans where you're putting the investment, but as the company hits the targets on impact and profitability, there is interest rate subvention. So you are talking about high-risk capital, but structuring it around what do you incentivize in the value chain. So the role of, I feel, actors like WRI or other advisors, Niti Aayog, is to help us identify as investors what do we incentivize. What do we incentivize with that high-risk capital, which can go further into the capital stack? Because one type of capital will not be enough to move the entire industry to the direction. So coming back to the startup ecosystem, on the investor side, there are trust issues, trade-offs are a problem, perceived risk is a problem. On the startup side, the affordability of capital is very high. The cost of innovation and research is very high in India as of now. And also the whole idea around how to work with a bank, how to work with an ecosystem. For a startup founder, the ecosystem seems broken from where they look at. So how do you really mentor them, advise them? That part, I feel we are asking too much from startups to come in. But then there are startups like Urban Company, or there are startups like, Urban Company is one example, not from climate space, but which did benefit from the government regulatory environment with skilling and everything, and the kind of commercial finance that it could attract, to now coming to be one of the glorious success stories on when finance meets purpose. So that's what.
Thank you. So just hold on to the thought. I'm going to come back to you, but Madhav has to leave, I think, he has to move to another panel. So I think, should we have a photograph if there's someone available with all the panelists? If not, then I'll let Madhav leave because he has to leave again. Sure. Thanks a lot, Madhav. And would love to have some more things for you, but maybe in a separate session, we'll be able to catch up with you. Yeah. So. Hello. Yeah. Coming back to you, Shruti. So would like to, go a bit more deeper into this innovative techniques, right, and mechanisms. And we often keep on hearing about the role of blended finance. That's the buzzword right now. But if you talk, whenever I talk to startups or, they are still confused about these new terminologies and how to access this kind of financing as a startup, right? So what are some of the solutions that you can think of in terms of, these innovative solutions which are out there and which can be easily accelerated in terms of their uptake?
So, thanks, Pamli. And I am also a skeptic when it comes to making these structures even more complicated, right? Like financing structures are anyways, imagine a researcher who has started a company with a solar dryer with something, and then you're saying, okay, now you navigate all these different blended structures. It is a tough ask. So I think the responsibility is with the ecosystem to build structures which are easy to navigate, and also easy to access with the current infrastructure. Like Niti Aayog or the Invest India program or the Atal Innovation Centers are doing a marvelous job. The infrastructure is already there. How do you make it even easier to invest? We get a lot of pipeline as early stage investors. We get a lot of pipeline from Atal Innovation Centers to look at and invest in. So on blended finance, I feel that there is more education in the industry required. There is more requirement to make it specific to industries. You can't set the same structure of blended finance for agriculture as for circularity as for, say, EV, because it will have a very different configuration. So, however, as a concept, to those who don't know this, is blended finance is about bringing in concessionary or philanthropic capital to unlock larger public capital and build that trust through that money for larger money to come in. So I think, but simpler structures I'm feeling is, and I'm seeing, and this is not conceptual, to be working out, which is like impact link finance. So on textile waste management, for example, what we have done is given a loan of 2.5 CR to a company to start textile waste management facility, but on an interest rate subvention. So the financing doesn't have to be extractive as it has been traditionally, but it has to be regenerative. That it becomes itself, and especially in nascent sectors which nobody knows, like textile waste management, it's still new. Or working on impact linked or revenue-based financing. So you are not diluting the founder's stake in a company by taking equity, but you do revenue-based financing, which is you get a share of a revenue from the company as they progress into a sector which is new. So I think we need to get open. The mindset shift is what is required. I don't think availability of capital, especially for the startups, is a problem in India for now. Higher ticket size, yes, there are, like Sir said, the amount of money that's needed for the entire transition is still under finance. But I feel that it's a mindset shift that is required to make that happen.
So that's a very positive note, actually, because generally the issue is the concern that the money is not available. So actually, moving to Vivek, I know we have I think we have to kind of end in 1 minute, but that's not possible for sure. Is it okay if we can continue for 10 minutes? Yeah, okay. And coming to Vivek and then Sujoy, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So Vivek actually kind of trying to understand a bit more in terms of these particular financing mechanisms which you see are relevant for these innovative infrastructure projects in the energy sector. Would you like to share some thoughts of yours on that? And in the context of the policy environment that is right now, continuous discussion around nuclear, green hydrogen. Yeah.
No, certainly. And I think we are actually in a good place as far as the country is concerned, because definitely on the startup side, as Shruti said, there's good amount of fund flow. I think even in terms of project financing, if someone says, I want to set up a large solar, wind or whatever project, I think financing is easy to get. You have both institutional capital as well as, you would have private capital, because it's stable returns, and there are enough global funds as well which would be interested. Where I think perhaps more effort is required is on the second part of it, which is when you look at the supply chain side. So there, I think government is trying with PLIs, they are trying with grants, they are trying with subsidies, states are pitching in. So I think what is missing is when someone tries to catch on to it, in conventional finance, the question is, where is the market, right? How much will you sell? And that's where I think we need a little extra nudge where the government will say that, yes, there's a certain output you will generate. Let's underwrite that in some way, either through a collection of buyers, who can say that collectively, individually our demands may go up or down, but then collectively as a set of organizations, this is the kind of demand we foresee. And how do we sort of connect the two so that, the investments on the capacity and manufacturing side then also become bankable and, they get attractive support from the financing point of view. And then thirdly, I would say, there is a part around just making it attractive where financing itself may not be required, right? Because if you say that you're going to go down from 16 rupees to 5 rupees or 8 to 5 rupees, then a lot of projects become viable on their own, right? So we have these kind of issues like there are caps on how much you can generate on your rooftop and what's the amount you're allowed for net metering. I mean, if we were to just run a assessment of how many industrial sheds are today not having solar panels and just take that as a single metric, that within the next 5-10 years, this has to be 100%. If you have a shed, you need to have a solar panel on it, right? And then it's going to go to the grid or you can consume it. I think things like that itself will unlock so many things in the country and it will be self-financed. So I think we are taking some steps in that direction. Very recently, they came out for your house. If you want to do a solar panel, there will be support from the government and things like that. We need more of that. And more importantly, we need to make sure that whatever we are talking on financing is also equally supported by the policy side of it.
No, definitely. I think policy, regulatory, financial, environment, they have to work together along with the data and evidence which is required where basically organizations like WRI come in. The final question for Sujoy. So what do you think are going to be these game changers for the next decade? Or maybe a bit more than a decade. We have a 2070 timeline in our minds. So, yeah.
So, Mr. Subramaniam mentioned about competitiveness, right? I'll give you a data point. What's the cost of capital in China? Debt, 3%. That's what the Chinese manufacturing sector or the infrastructure gets debt at. What do you think is their equity IRR hurdle rate?
Quiz for me?
Yeah. Anybody in the room? If you get to 1% IRR, you're profitable in China because they're licensed to lose money. That's what we are up against, right? And so, yes, I think all this discussion, we have to, if you really want a big shift, we have to we can't be, benchmarking against China and then applying all our lenses of, we got this constraint, that constraint, and saying, well, you got to be at Chinese cost with Indian cost of capital. Impossible. I'll give you another data point, right? Vivek spoke about 2.5 rupees power. That's at 8% to 9% cost of long-term capital for a large asset, right? Guess what's the rate of energy in the US? It's less than 2 rupees. Even though their capital cost, labor cost, everything is high. Why? Because they're able to borrow at 2% debt on long-term assets, right? So I think we have to really look at, is our finance competitive, right? And that to me requires, and as Mr. Subramaniam said, it's not a call for people in this room, but at least through the synergy and through WRI, we should also look at benchmarking. Where are we with respect to our cost of capital, right? Risk adjusted. And then look at what are the pockets of risk which the lenders are pricing. And how much of that falls in the regulatory and mostly the regulatory basket. Well, that's where you need the big shift to happen. So, I'll leave it there, but I think if you ask me for a big shift, then it's to do with competitiveness.
Yeah, I guess it all boils down to competitiveness. How much ever we may put in grant or subsidy into the market, it's at the end of the day, we have to be kind of out there in the market competing and then being able to get that returns for the investors or even for the business to be sustainable. So I think I have got only 3 warnings. And I'll not try to summarize this session because please feel free to get connected with Shruti and Vivek and Sujoy. They're around. I think we have like experts with whom we can spend much more time learning much more. But essentially, the few things they talked about in terms of be it competitiveness or be it in terms of how the different sectors in the ecosystem partners should work together. In terms of having a customized approach and not trying to say that every instrument is going to be equally applicable for each and every entity out there. So yeah, let's see how we can further continue to build on this ecosystem that we have created. And thanks a lot to all the speakers. And this braving the rains. I know Sujoy was kind of flying in from Chennai. Thanks a lot. Same with Shruti, and thanks to Vivek. Glad to have you all here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for being a nice moderate.
Thank you.
As we come to the close of this insightful panel discussion, it is my privilege to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks to all those who made this session truly enriching. First and foremost, I would like to thank our esteemed panelists for sharing their expertise, perspectives, and thought-provoking ideas. To our organizing team, our partners, and technical support staff, thank you for your seamless coordination and behind-the-scene efforts that made today's event possible. Let's carry forward the momentum from today's conversation and continue to collaborate, innovate, and drive impact in our respective fields. Thank you once again and have a wonderful day ahead. You will see a QR code on the standees and displayed on the screen later, which links directly to the CI-NERGY Alliance landing page and contact form. We encourage you to visit the web page, fill in the form, and our team will reach out to you with more details and next steps. Thank you, everyone.